In a remote and isolated location in western Afghanistan is the beautiful Minaret of Jam. The monument's isolated setting in a rugged valley amongst towering mountains adds greatly to its quality. Both the minaret and its landscape have maintained a high degree of integrity because they have been little touched over the past millennium. We started the drive to Jam in an overland truck, but the truck proved unfit for purpose, and for long stretches it could barely make 10 miles per hour or 16 kilometers per hour over the rough road. Once past Bamiyan, the countryside became mountainous and very photogenic for the challenging 250-mile or 400-kilometer drive to Jam over a rough road. These mountains are part of the famous Kush range, which spreads for 500 miles or 800 kilometers, with its core in Afghanistan. The name Hindu Kush, meaning Hindu killer, originated with the Muslim slave traders in the 14th century due to the high death rate of the Indian slaves that they were taking over the cold mountains from the Indian subcontinent to Turkestan. A Chinese mining consortium has been awarded a contract to develop an iron ore and copper mine, but progress has been hampered by security issues. When the United States military skedaddled from Afghanistan in 2021 after 20 years of war, it left the Taliban billions of dollars worth of military equipment. The Taliban now use that equipment in their military. One fact that stood out was the lack of women out in public in the towns that we passed through. The Taliban have placed severe restrictions on women and girls' access to public spaces and education, amongst other things. The Green River valleys are farmed intensively, leaving the surrounded arid hills to shepherds and goat herds. Like most of rural Afghanistan deep in the mountains, there is no electricity, and services such as health care and schooling are limited, making for a hard life. The infrastructure in Afghanistan is generally poor, a situation that has been aggravated by 20 years of the American War, which was preceded by 10 years of the Soviet War. Although it's an arid expanse, the river valleys are home to some pretty flowers and even birds such as the western yellow wagtail, whose feathers match the yellow of the fields of buttercups. In 2021, Afghanistan's opium poppy harvest produced more than 90% of illicit heroin globally. The Taliban outlawed production in 2022. However, eradicating poppy cultivation is beyond the capability of the Taliban. Throughout Afghanistan, there are many Taliban checkpoints equipped with ex-US Army Humvees and manned by Taliban, some of whom are armed with US M4 carbines. Overall, the rough mountain road was beyond the capability of the overland truck to traverse in a safe and effective manner. Surprisingly, this rough road was the main east-west road from Kabul to Herat. Hence, it is routinely traversed by large transport trucks, so it shouldn't have been a challenge to our so-called overland truck. After a long slog up the mountains in our overland truck, we were finally standing atop a high pass, just like many others had done before us, including Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Tamerlane, and Babur, who founded the Mughal Empire in India in the 16th century. Driving through these mountains highlighted the principal military problem faced by invaders seeking to control Afghanistan, namely the mountainous terrain that covers nearly two-thirds of the country. It splits forces into different areas of operation whilst providing many hiding places for the enemy. The fierce independence of the Afghan makes controlling the country even more difficult, as invaders such as the Greeks, the Soviets, and the Americans found. The road was in rough shape, and the so-called overland truck violently rolled back and forth, throwing us about. We stopped for a picnic lunch in a mountain village and collected a group of curious children. In these remote villages with small fields and difficult terrain, draft animals, mainly oxen, are used as the main farm power source for plowing, hauling, and threshing. However, farmers frequently only own a single oxen, so they join together with other single oxen owners to plow each other's fields. The farming techniques used in these parts of Afghanistan are essentially those used by the ancient Egyptians some 7,000 years ago. Eventually, after hours of slogging down the road in the truck, it dawned on our tour leader that we couldn't make sufficient progress in the truck, so we crammed into several microbuses that were better suited to the rough road. The truck then struggled along on its own. Getting to Jam was a challenge, as the narrow, dusty mountain road is in poor condition with heavy rutting. We were crammed into a microbus that had minimal leg room. It was hot and the vehicle had no air conditioning. The icing on the cake was that the windows couldn't be kept open, as the dusty road made that impractical. We traversed the rugged Kobaba Mountains, which are one of the most westerly extensions of the Hindu Kush range. The minaret, built in 1165 AD as Islam expanded into Central Asia, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site that stands on its own on the banks of the Hari River in a narrow rocky valley flanked by mountains that rise up to 7,900 feet or 2,400 meters. The minaret is 213 feet or 65 meters high and is built entirely of fired brick. It's famous for its intricate brick, stucco, and glazed tile decoration, which consists of alternating bands of geometric patterns and calligraphic verses from the Koran. Fluvial erosion of the minaret's base has caused the tower to lean about 3.5 degrees from its vertical axis. The locals have made a Tyrolean traverse which they use to pull visitors across the Hari River so the minaret can be seen up close. This made the visit more special and fun and only cost a nominal amount. The exterior of the minaret is covered with geometric decoration in relief over plain structural brick. The first tier of the minaret is the most decorated, with the three-dimensional ornamental brickwork creating a pattern of light and shade. The main inscription of the minaret is made of bricks with a blue glazed face that form calligraphy in the form of verses from the Koran. Jam probably marks the site of Firuzkoh, the summer capital of the Ghurid Empire, of which only the minaret remains today, to mark its location.
Woo! Go Claire!
Crossing back over the Hari River, we wound up our interesting trip to the eerily lonely and beautiful Minaret of Jam and started our long trip to the city of Herat. We drove for up to 16 hours a day to get to Herat per the itinerary, this in a cramped microbus, and driving well into the midnight hour. It was impossible to see the countryside whilst driving in the dark. Young rural Afghan children learn skills required to live in their harsh environment, skills that are no longer considered safe in our Western world. It was wonderful to visit the unique Minaret of Jam, but it was not realistic to make the trip in an overland truck that was not fit for purpose, whilst trying to stick to a ridiculous itinerary. Hopefully, the Taliban will ensure that the required stabilization for the minaret is undertaken before the minaret collapses after 9 centuries of deterioration. If you enjoyed this film, please subscribe and like. There are many more similar films available on my channel.